I used to work the night shift at a 24-hour diner located on the outskirts of town. The diner was a popular spot for truckers and night owls, but during the late hours, it often became a haven for the more peculiar characters. I worked from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., a schedule that allowed me to be home during the day for my young daughter. It was a tough routine, but necessary to make ends meet. One particularly chilly autumn night, I arrived at the diner to find it unusually quiet. The usual crowd of truckers and late-night diners was sparse, and the atmosphere felt off. As the night wore on, the diner remained eerily empty, save for a few regulars who came and went. Around 1 a.m., a man walked in. He was tall and lanky, with unkempt hair and a long, tattered coat. He had a peculiar air about him, and he carried a large, worn-out backpack. He took a seat at the counter, ordering nothing but a cup of coffee. As I served him, I noticed his eyes following me intently, making me feel uneasy. He sipped his coffee slowly, never taking his eyes off me. I tried to busy myself with cleaning and organizing, but I could feel his gaze on me the entire time. After a while, he started making small talk, asking if I worked here often and if I lived nearby. His questions were casual at first, but they quickly became more personal. He asked if I had a family, if I was married, and where I lived. I answered vaguely, trying to remain polite but distant. He seemed to sense my discomfort and leaned in closer, lowering his voice as he spoke. He told me he had been watching me for a while and that he found me intriguing. His words sent a chill down my spine, and I tried to laugh it off, telling him I was just a regular waitress with a busy life. He didn't seem deterred and continued to press for more information, asking for my phone number and suggesting we meet up after my shift. I declined, saying I was busy with work and family commitments. He persisted, insisting that we could just be friends. To get him to leave me alone, I reluctantly gave him a fake number, hoping it would satisfy him. He seemed pleased and finally left the diner, but not before giving me a lingering, unsettling smile. I hoped that would be the end of it, but a couple of hours later, my coworker, who was working the kitchen, came out to tell me that a man was asking for me at the back door. My heart sank. I told her to say I was busy, and quickly made my way to the staff room, hoping to avoid him. As I sat in the staff room, trying to calm my nerves, the door suddenly creaked open. It was him. He looked angry, accusing me of giving him a fake number. My heart raced as he dropped his backpack on the floor and started rummaging through it. I didn't wait to see what he was reaching for. I bolted past him, running through the diner and out into the parking lot. I jumped into my car, locking the doors as I watched him emerge from the diner, scanning the lot for me. He seemed disoriented, and I took the opportunity to start the engine and drive away. Once I was a safe distance from the diner, I pulled over and called my manager, explaining what had happened. He assured me he would call the police and review the security footage. I didn't return to work that night, and the next day, my manager confirmed that the police had been notified and were investigating. I never saw that man again, but the experience left me deeply shaken. Working nights had its share of strange encounters, but this one was by far the most terrifying. I often wonder what he had in that backpack, but I'm grateful I never found out. I was 15 when this unsettling experience occurred. There was a small grocery store within walking distance from my house, and I often went there to pick up snacks or small items. It was convenient, especially since I wasn't old enough to drive yet. Sometimes I'd go with my friend Alex, but more often, I went alone. The store was part of a small strip mall that had seen better days, with many of the shops closing over the years. One evening, I decided to walk there with my headphones on, listening to music. It was about a 10-minute walk, and I liked to zone out during the walk. Most people understand that headphones mean you don't want to be disturbed, but apparently not everyone. I was browsing the snack aisle when I noticed a man standing nearby, seemingly trying to get my attention. I took out one of my earbuds and asked if he was talking to me. He was a tall man, probably in his late 40s, with a scruffy beard and a baseball cap. He smiled and said he was just commenting on how his son loved the same brand of chips I was holding. I nodded politely, thinking that would be the end of it, but he continued to talk. He asked how old I was, and I told him I was 15. His response was unsettling. He said something like, "Ah, such a fun age, full of possibilities." He then asked my name, and without thinking, I told him. He said it was a beautiful name and asked if I lived nearby. I started to feel uneasy and told him I was just visiting a friend. He seemed to persist, asking where I was from. I kept it vague, saying I was from out of town. He then said he thought he had seen me around before, which made me feel even more uncomfortable. I decided to leave the aisle and head to the checkout. After paying for my items, I left the store and started walking back home. As I walked, I noticed the man was following me at a distance. My heart started to race, and I quickly called my dad, telling him what was happening. He told me to head to a nearby cafe and wait there until he arrived. I went into the cafe, which was thankfully busy, and sat down at a table near the window. The man stood outside for a moment, looking in, before walking away. I felt a wave of relief when I saw him leave. A kind barista noticed I was upset and came over to ask if I was okay. I explained the situation, and she offered to stay with me until my dad arrived. When my dad got there, I left with him, feeling grateful for the barista's kindness. After that incident, I was much more cautious about going to that store alone. I hope that man never bothered anyone else and that he realized how inappropriate his behavior was. A few weeks later, I heard from a friend that a man matching his description had been seen hanging around the strip mall, making other people uncomfortable. It seemed I wasn't the only one who had encountered him. This made me even more wary of going there alone. I started to plan my visits with friends or during busier times of the day. One day, while I was at the store with Alex, we noticed the man again. He was lingering near the entrance, seemingly watching people as they came and went. We decided to report him to the store manager, who assured us they would keep an eye on him and contact the authorities if necessary. It was a relief to know that others were aware of his presence and that steps were being taken to address the situation. Despite the unsettling nature of these encounters, I learned the importance of trusting my instincts and seeking help when something doesn't feel right. It also reinforced the value of community and looking out for one another. I hope that man eventually got the help he needed and that he stopped making others feel uncomfortable. Working at the local grocery store was never my dream job, but it paid the bills. I was 25 and juggling 2 jobs to keep up with rent and student loans. Most days I worked as a cashier, but sometimes I helped stock shelves or assisted customers. It was a typical Tuesday evening, and I was on the late shift, tidying up the aisles and helping the occasional shopper. That night, I had an unsettling encounter. As I was organizing the cereal aisle, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned around to see my ex-boyfriend, Alex, standing there with a wide grin. I was taken aback because he lived in a different city, and we hadn't spoken since our messy breakup. He said he was in town visiting friends and heard I worked here. Our relationship had ended badly, with him becoming increasingly possessive and erratic. I had to block him on all platforms to get some peace. Despite my surprise, I tried to be polite and asked how he was doing. He seemed overly enthusiastic, asking if we could catch up after my shift. I declined, saying I had plans, but he persisted, making me uncomfortable. I reiterated that I wasn't interested and needed to get back to work. His demeanor shifted, and he accused me of being unfair and cutting him out of my life. I told him this was exactly why I had to distance myself and asked him to leave. After my shift ended around midnight, I drove home, feeling uneasy. My roommate, Sarah, was out of town, so I was alone. I locked the door behind me and went to the kitchen to make a quick dinner. As I sat in the living room eating, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I dismissed it as paranoia and decided to play some video games to relax. A couple of hours later, I went to bed, exhausted. I woke up suddenly, hearing a noise. My bedroom door was ajar, which was odd because I always closed it. I got up to investigate and found the front door slightly open. My heart raced as I checked the lock, which was broken. I grabbed my phone and called Sarah, hoping she might have come home early, but there was no answer. I went to the kitchen and noticed a knife was missing from the block. Panic set in as I realized someone had been in the house. I quietly moved to the living room, trying to stay calm. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to see Alex standing there. holding the missing knife. He looked distressed, saying he just wanted to talk. I backed away slowly, trying to keep him calm while I dialed 911 behind my back. I told him we could talk, but he needed to put the knife down. He hesitated, and I took the chance to run to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. I whispered to the dispatcher, explaining the situation. Minutes felt like hours as I waited for the police. Alex banged on the door, pleading for me to come out. I stayed silent, hoping he would give up. Finally, I heard sirens and the police announcing their presence. Alex dropped the knife and surrendered without a fight. He was arrested and charged with breaking and entering, among other things. I was relieved but shaken. I realized how important it was to trust my instincts and take precautions. I moved out soon after, determined to start fresh and leave the past behind. In the weeks that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I changed my phone number and made sure my social media profiles were private. I even took a self-defense class to feel more secure. Despite these efforts, I often found myself looking over my shoulder, worried that Alex might try to contact me again. One evening, as I was leaving work, I noticed a familiar car parked across the street. My heart skipped a beat when I realized it was Alex's. I quickly walked to my car, trying to stay calm. As I drove away, I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting him to follow me. Thankfully, he didn't. I reported the incident to the police, and they assured me they would keep an eye on the situation. They suggested I consider a restraining order, which I promptly filed for. The process was daunting, but I knew it was necessary for my safety. Over time, the sightings stopped, and I began to feel more at ease. I focused on my work and hobbies, trying to rebuild my life. I made new friends and even started dating again, though I was much more cautious this time around. Looking back, I realized how important it was to recognize the red flags in a relationship and to trust my instincts. I learned to prioritize my safety and well-being above all else. Though the experience was terrifying, it taught me valuable lessons about resilience and self-preservation.